The splintered wood bit into my fingers, a cruel mockery of the gentle rocking it was meant for. I stood in the pouring rain, illuminated by the cold, sterile glow of a single street lamp, pulling the pieces of the cradle from the dumpster. He hadn't just thrown it away, he had smashed it. The beautiful oak cradle, the one his own grandfather had made, the one we had sanded and stained together in what felt like another lifetime, was now just a pile of jagged, rain-soaked kindling. Each broken piece felt like a shard of my own heart. NHE had done this just hours after I brought our daughters home. 7 of them. 7 tiny, perfect, beautiful girls. He hadn't even looked at them. He had waited until I was trying to settle them in their makeshift beds. Laundry baskets lined with blankets, because where else could they sleep? And he had taken the cradle, our one family heirloom, out to the curb and destroyed it. And I heard the crash. A violent, splintering sound that ripped through the quiet murmur of the babies. When I ran to the window, I saw him, my husband David. He was standing over the wreckage, his chest heaving, his face contorted in a mask of such profound disappointment, it looked like hatred. He looked up and our eyes met through the rain-streaked glass. He didn't flinch. He just gave the pile one last, vicious kick, turned and walked back into the house, leaving me and our 7 daughters with the wreckage of his promise. NHE didn't want daughters. He had made that clear. But this act, this violent destruction of a symbol of our future, was a declaration of war. He wasn't just rejecting them, he was trying to erase them. As I stood there, rain plastering my hair to my face, my body still aching from childbirth, a cold, hard resolve settled in my soul. He thought he could break me. He thought he could throw away our children like so much trash. He had no idea the kind of woman he had just created. This wasn't just about a broken cradle. This was about a broken family, and I would spend the rest of my life picking up the pieces and building something stronger from the wreckage, a fortress he could never touch. NIF, your heart is already aching. You know this is a story you need to see through to the end. Please, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the moment justice is served. Now, let's get back to the beginning of the storm. Our life, before the babies, was a carefully curated masterpiece of suburban perfection. From the outside, we were the couple everyone wanted to be. David was a rising star in corporate finance, handsome, charismatic, and ambitious. I was a former art curator who had, at his gentle insistence, given up my career to become a full-time homemaker. "I want to give you the world, Clara," he'd said. "I want you to be able to focus on creating a beautiful home, a beautiful life for us." It sounded romantic, like a line from a classic movie. I didn't realize then that he wasn't giving me the world. He was giving me a gilded cage. And our house was immaculate, a sprawling modern home with floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine. I hosted dinner parties where David would hold court, charming his colleagues and their wives. I was the perfect accessory, always smiling, always agreeing, my own thoughts and opinions carefully tucked away, like old paintings in an attic. David didn't like dissent. He called it negativity. Our life was a performance, and I was the lead actress in a play I hadn't realized I was auditioning for. NTHE pressure for a child began subtly. "This house needs the sound of little feet," he'd say, draping an arm around me as we stood in the cavernous, silent living room. But as months turned into a year, the subtlety vanished. It became an obsession, but a specific one. He wanted a son, an heir. David Jr., he'd muse, swirling a glass of expensive scotch. "He'll take over the firm one day. We'll teach him to sail, to play golf. He'll carry on the legacy." NHE spoke of this hypothetical son as if he were already a person, a fully formed entity waiting in the wings. He never, not once, mentioned the possibility of a daughter. When I tried to gently introduce the idea, "What if we have a girl, David? We could teach her to sail," his smile would tighten. "Let's focus on the positive, Clara. Thanks, son." It was a command, not a suggestion. The journey to conceive was clinical and cold. It involved charts, schedules, and expensive specialists. My body became a project, a variable to be managed and optimized for a specific outcome. The romance had long since evaporated, replaced by a relentless, goal-oriented pressure that made me feel like a failing investment. During this time, I found a small solace. In the attic, tucked away under a dust sheet, was the cradle. It was made of solid oak, with hand-carved details of swallows and leaves. It had been in his family for generations. I would sneak up there and run my hands over the smooth wood, imagining a baby, any baby, sleeping peacefully within it. It was the only thing in our sterile house that felt like it had a soul. When we finally found out I was pregnant, David was ecstatic. He popped a bottle of champagne that cost more than my first car. "To my son," he toasted, his eyes gleaming with triumph. I smiled, but a knot of dread was already forming in my stomach. At the first ultrasound, the technician was quiet for a long time. She kept moving the wand, her brow furrowed. "Just a moment," she said, and left the room. My heart hammered against my ribs. I was sure something was wrong. NSHE returned with the head of the department, a kind-faced older doctor. He looked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. "Well, Mrs. Sterling," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "The reason she was having trouble is because there's quite a crowd in there." He paused for dramatic effect. "I'm counting 7. You're expecting septuplets." 7. The number was so immense, so life-altering, that I couldn't speak. I just stared at the swirling black and white images on the screen. 7 tiny heartbeats, 7 miracles. Then, the doctor added the words that would seal my fate. "And from what we can see of the chromosomal markers, the indicators are all consistent. It appears, Mrs. Sterling, that you're going to have 7 daughters. And 7 daughters." A wave of dizziness washed over me. It wasn't disappointment I felt, but pure, unadulterated terror. I knew David. I knew his obsession, his single-minded focus on a male heir. This wasn't just a deviation from his plan. This was the complete and utter demolition of it. I thought of the cradle upstairs, the one meant for David Jr., and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that my 7 daughters would never be welcome in it. The gilded cage was about to become a battlefield. Inne made a decision in that sterile, silent ultrasound room. A decision born of fear and a desperate primal need to protect the 7 lives growing inside me. I would not tell him. Not the full truth. NTHAT evening, I sat David down in our perfect living room, the setting sun casting long, ominous shadows across the white marble floor. I took a deep breath and told him I was pregnant with septuplets. For a moment, his face registered pure shock. 7. The number hung in the air between us. But then his shock morphed into something else. A manic, almost terrifying grin spread across his face. 7! He boomed, his voice echoing in the silent house. 7 chances for a boy. The odds are in our favor now, Clara. We'll get our son. We'll probably get a few. NHE was already planning, his mind racing. He talked about legacy, about a dynasty, about having enough sons to form his own board of directors. He saw it as the ultimate victory, a testament to his own virility and power. Listening to him, I felt a profound sickness in the pit of my stomach. He wasn't celebrating 7 children, he was celebrating 7 lottery tickets. And he was blissfully unaware that every single one was already a losing ticket in his eyes. NMY silence became my shield and my prison. I was complicit in his delusion, and every day the lie grew heavier. The pregnancy was, to put it mildly, hellish. The doctors immediately classified it as extremely high risk. They spoke in grave tones about the dangers to my health, the low probability of all 7 surviving, and the near certainty of premature birth. They strongly, repeatedly, advised selective reduction. "We are talking about your life, Mrs. Sterling," one specialist told me, his eyes full of genuine concern. and the viability of the other fetuses. And each time I refused. The thought of choosing which of my daughters would live and which would die was a horror I couldn't contemplate. They were all mine. I would fight for all of them. My refusal only solidified David's narrative. He saw it as proof of my strength, my commitment to his sons. "That's my girl," he'd say proudly, "fighting for our boys." He had no idea I was fighting against him. He put me on strict bed rest, hiring a private nurse to monitor me. It wasn't out of concern for my well-being. It was to protect his investment. I became a prisoner in my own bedroom, my world shrinking to the view from my window. My only comfort was the cradle. I had convinced David to bring it down from the attic, placing it in the corner of our room. He saw it as a symbol of the son to come. I saw it as a silent promise to the daughters he would never accept. I would talk to them, my hand resting on my enormous belly, my other hand on the smooth, carved wood of the cradle. I promised them I would love them enough for the both of us. And as the weeks passed, David's excitement grew to a fever pitch. He commissioned a local artist to paint a mural in the nursery, a sprawling family tree with 7 branches, 6 of them ending in blue ribbons, and one, as a concession to me, ending in pink. He bought tiny sports jerseys, miniature golf clubs, and business-themed onesies that said, "Future CEO." His delusion was so complete, so absolute, that it was terrifying. He was building a fantasy world, and I knew that when reality came crashing in, the fallout would be catastrophic. NTHE day it happened. I was 32 weeks along. It was the middle of the night. A sharp, undeniable pain jolted me awake. This was it. It was too soon, but it was happening. The nurse on duty, a woman David had hired for her efficiency, not her warmth, called the ambulance with a practiced calm. David, however, was a whirlwind of frantic energy. He grabbed the hospital bag he had packed months ago, the one filled with, "It's a boy," balloons, and a blue receiving blanket. "This is it," he kept saying, his face flushed with excitement. "I'm going to meet my son." NTHE ride to the hospital was a blur of pain and anxiety. At the hospital, a team of doctors and nurses was waiting. I was rushed into a specialized operating room, large enough to accommodate 7 neonatal teams. David was told to wait outside. As they wheeled me through the double doors, he grabbed my hand. "Bring me my son, Clara," he whispered, his eyes burning with a desperate intensity. It wasn't a request, it was an ultimatum. And as the doors swung shut, I knew I was being wheeled not just into childbirth, but into the end of my life as I knew it. Section 3, the Silence of the Lambs NTHE operating room, was a symphony of controlled chaos. Bright lights, beeping machines, and the calm, focused voices of medical professionals filled the air. My own world had narrowed to the rhythmic contractions and the reassuring voice of the anesthesiologist. The births were swift, a succession of tiny bodies brought into the world via C-section. One after another they arrived, each one whisked away by a dedicated team that worked to stabilize them. "And baby A is a girl," a nurse announced, her voice clear and professional. I felt a pang of terror, but it was quickly followed by another wave of pain. "Baby B is a girl." NTHE announcements continued, a steady, 7-fold drumbeat of a reality David would not accept. "Baby C, a girl. Baby D, a girl. Baby E, a girl. Baby F, a girl. Baby G is also a girl. 7 daughters. All of them alive, all of them fighting. They were premature, fragile, but they were here. A wave of overwhelming love washed over me, so powerful it momentarily eclipsed my fear. My daughters. My beautiful, brave little girls. When I was wheeled into the recovery room, groggy and sore, David was already there. He was pacing the floor, his expensive suit jacket discarded, his tie loosened. He looked like a caged tiger. He stopped when he saw me, his eyes scanning my face, searching for the news. "Well?" he demanded, his voice tight. How many boys?" And I took a breath, the truth sitting like a stone on my tongue. "David," I began, my voice raspy. "They're all girls." NFOR a full 10 seconds. He didn't move. He just stared at me, his face a complete blank. The silence in the room was absolute, a vacuum, where his joy should have been. Then, his expression began to change. It curdled, twisted into something ugly and unrecognizable. The charismatic mask fell away, revealing the monster beneath. "No," he whispered, the word a puff of disbelief. "No, you're lying. The doctor made a mistake. David, they're beautiful," I pleaded, tears welling in my eyes. 7 perfect little girls. "Perfect?" he hissed, his voice low and venomous. 7 of them? What am I supposed to do with 7 girls? What is the point?" He wasn't just disappointed. He was disgusted. He looked at me as if I had personally and maliciously betrayed him, as if my body had willfully defied his command. He saw our daughters not as children, but as 7 failures, 7 monuments to his dashed hopes. In man, he turned his back on me and walked to the window, staring out at the city lights. He ran a hand through his hair, his shoulders tense. He didn't ask about my health. He didn't ask about the baby's condition. His entire world had collapsed because it was painted pink instead of blue. "I can't," he said, his back still to me. "I can't do this." "What do you mean, you can't do this?" I asked, a cold dread creeping up my spine. "There are children." And He turned around, and his eyes were cold, empty voids. "No," he said, his voice flat and final. "They are your children. Your mistake." And He walked out of the room without another word. He didn't slam the door. He closed it softly, a quiet, deliberate act of abandonment that was more chilling than any shout. I was left alone in the silent, sterile room, the beeping of the machines the only sound. He had left me. He had left his 7 newborn daughters without a second glance. The silence he left behind was not peaceful. It was the silence of the lambs, the terrifying quiet that comes after the predator has walked away, leaving the carnage behind. I was alone, with 7 fragile lives depending on me, and a husband who had just declared them, and me, worthless. The fight for their survival had just begun, but I was already fighting it alone, and NTHE days that followed were a blur of grief, pain, and fierce protective love. My body was recovering from major surgery, but my heart was shattered. David didn't come back. He didn't call. He sent a single text message to my phone 2 days later. "My lawyer will be in touch. The house is being sold. You have 30 days to vacate." NTHE cruelty was breathtaking. While I was sitting by the incubators in the NICU, singing to my 7 tiny, struggling daughters, he was dismantling our life. He was liquidating our assets, erasing me from his world with the same cold efficiency he applied to a business deal. The nurses in the NICU were my lifeline. They were a tribe of quiet, strong women who saw my pain and rallied around me. They brought me food, made sure I was resting, and spoke to my daughters with a tenderness that brought tears to my eyes. Look at faith fighting, one would say. And hope has the strongest grip. I gave them names that were prayers: hope, faith, grace, mercy, joy, patience, and serenity. NTHE hospital social worker, a woman named Maria with tired but kind eyes, became my general. She listened to my story, her expression hardening with every detail. "Men like him," she said, her voice laced with a weary anger. "They build cages and call them castles. Don't you worry, Clara. We're going to get you out of this." NSHE was the one who broke the news that David had already filed for divorce, claiming, quote, irreconcilable difference and making no claim for custody. He didn't want them. He was legally and emotionally washing his hands of his 7 children. Maria helped me find a pro bono lawyer, a fierce young woman named Sarah, who specialized in fighting for women in impossible situations. "He's not going to get away with this," Sarah promised me, her eyes flashing with righteous anger. "Financially, at least. We'll fight for every penny your daughters are owed." NTHE hardest part was leaving the hospital. After weeks in the NICU, the girls were finally strong enough to be discharged, one by one. But I had nowhere to take them. The house was gone, the locks changed. My bank accounts, which had been joint, were frozen. David had left me utterly destitute. It was Maria and the NICU nurses who saved me. They pooled their own money and paid the deposit on a small, run-down rental house on the other side of town. It was a world away from the sterile mansion I had left, with peeling paint and mismatched furniture, but it was a sanctuary. NTHE Day I brought the last of my daughters home was the day of the cradle. I had asked a friend, one of the few who hadn't sided with David, to retrieve it from the house before the sale was final. She had placed it in the nursery, the one room I had tried to make beautiful with donated items. It was the only piece of our old life I wanted, the one thing that connected my girls to a history, however painful. And then he came. I don't know how he knew where I was. He must have had me followed. He didn't knock. He used his key, a key I didn't know he had, and let himself in. He walked straight past me, past the laundry baskets where 6 of my daughters were sleeping, and went into the nursery. I heard the crash. I ran in to see him standing over the splintered remains of the cradle, his face a mask of rage. "This," he spat, kicking a piece of the broken wood, "is for a son. It was always for a son. You had no right." NHE turned and left as quickly as he had come. I stood there, shaking, looking at the wreckage. It was the ultimate act of psychological warfare. He hadn't just abandoned his children, he had destroyed their heritage, their one link to his family. He wanted them to have nothing from him, not even a place to sleep. That night, as I pulled the broken pieces from the dumpster in the rain, something inside me hardened into steel. The grief was still there, but it was now overlaid with a cold, clear fury. He had left me with nothing but the wreckage of our life. And I would use that wreckage to build a fortress. NMY New Life was built from scraps. Scraps of furniture donated by strangers, scraps of time stolen between feedings and diaper changes, and scraps of my own shattered spirit that I was painstakingly gluing back together. The small rental house became our fortress. It was chaotic, loud, and perpetually smelled of baby powder and desperation, but it was ours. It was safe. NTHE first few months were about pure survival. I operated on a 24/7 schedule, a relentless cycle of feeding, burping, changing, and soothing 7 infants. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford, a forgotten memory from another life. I lived on coffee and the kindness of others. The NICU nurses continued to be my guardian angels, showing up on my doorstep with casseroles and bags of diapers. Maria, the social worker, became a grandmother to my girls, teaching me how to budget, how to navigate the labyrinth of social assistance, and how to hold my head high when I used food stamps at the grocery store. NMY lawyer Sarah was my warrior in the outside world. She fought David's high-powered legal team with a tenacity that was awe-inspiring. David's strategy was simple: starve me out. He dragged his feet on every child support payment, filed motion after motion to delay proceedings, and painted me in court documents as an unstable, vindictive woman, incapable of managing her own affairs, let alone raising 7 children. He tried to use my postpartum depression, a diagnosis I received and sought treatment for, as a weapon against me, arguing that I was an unfit mother. It was during one of these bleak periods, when the bills were piling up and the loneliness was a physical ache in my chest, that I found an unexpected weapon of my own, the cradle. I couldn't bring myself to throw away the broken pieces. I had gathered them from the dumpster and stored them in the basement, a painful reminder of David's cruelty. One night, unable to sleep, I went down and just looked at the pile of splintered oak. The carved swallows were broken, the smooth rails shattered. It was a symbol of everything I had lost. NBUT then, another thought occurred to me. I had been an art curator. I had a deep knowledge of restoration and design. What if I didn't see it as broken? What if I saw it as raw material? With a surge of adrenaline, I began to work. I took the largest, most intact pieces of the cradle and, using the tools Maria's husband had left in the garage, I started to transform them. I sanded down the jagged edges, filled the cracks with wood glue, and polished the dull wood until it shone. I wasn't rebuilding the cradle. I was creating something new. From the broken side panels, I fashioned 7 small, beautiful picture frames. From the carved headboard, with its broken swallows, I created a stunning wall sculpture, a mosaic of shattered wings that looked like they were taking flight. From the remaining scraps, I made small, hand-carved toys, a bird, a leaf, a star for each of my daughters. It was painstaking work, done in the dead of night while my daughters slept. But with every piece I salvaged, I felt a piece of myself healing. I was taking the ugliest, most painful symbol of my past and turning it into something beautiful and full of love. I was reclaiming the narrative. When Sarah, my lawyer, saw what I had done, her eyes went wide. "Clara," she said, her voice full of awe, "this is more than art. This is evidence." She took photos of the frames, the sculpture, the toys. She documented the transformation. It became a cornerstone of our legal strategy. We weren't just fighting for money anymore. We were fighting for the story. The story of a man who tried to destroy his family's legacy, and a woman who rebuilt it with her bare hands. The fortress of scraps was no longer just a house. It was a testament to my resilience, and we were about to take the battle to him. An NTHE courtroom felt like a sterile, airless version of my old life. David sat across from me, looking impeccable in a tailored suit, flanked by a team of lawyers who radiated expensive confidence. He looked bored, annoyed, as if this whole proceeding was a tedious inconvenience. He refused to look at me or at the evidence Sarah presented. Nietzsche's lawyer painted a picture of a man overwhelmed, a victim of my ambition and emotional instability. He argued that David's actions, including the destruction of the cradle, were the result of a momentary, stress-induced breakdown. "This is not a monster," the lawyer argued, gesturing to David. "This is a man who was pushed to the brink." Then it was Sarah's turn. She didn't just present facts and figures about David's income. She told a story. She started with the cradle, showing the judge a before picture of the beautiful heirloom. Then, she presented the police photos of the splintered wreckage in the dumpster. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, stared at the photos, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Sterling's lawyers claim this was an act of temporary insanity," Sarah said, her voice ringing with clarity. "A moment of panic. But we argue it was an act of profound symbolism, an attempt to erase a history that no longer suited him, an attempt to declare his 7 daughters and their mother worthless." Then she brought out the items I had made. She placed the 7 oak picture frames on the evidence table, each one holding a photo of one of my beautiful, smiling daughters. She unveiled the wall sculpture, the mosaic of broken swallows taking flight. "This," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a powerful hush, "is what my client, Clara Sterling, did with the wreckage. She did not discard it. She did not allow it to remain a symbol of hate and rejection. She took the broken pieces of her husband's legacy and she transformed them. She built something new. She built a future." NSHE turned to the judge. "Your Honor, look at this. Does this look like the work of an unstable, unfit mother? Or does it look like the work of a woman with more strength, resilience, and love in her little finger than Mr. Sterling has in his entire body?" NFOR, the first time, the judge's stern expression broke. She looked from the sculpture to the photos of my daughters, then to me, and for the first time she looked at David, really looked at him. And I saw in her eyes the same thing I had seen in his on that horrible night: disgust. NTHE final blow came from David's own mouth. Sarah put him on the stand. She questioned him about his finances, his business, his obsession with a son. He was arrogant, dismissive. Then she asked him about the cradle. "Mr. Sterling, can you tell the court why you destroyed this family heirloom?" NHE sneered, a flash of the old, ugly rage in his eyes. "It was meant for my son. It was my legacy. She had no right to it. It was tainted." "Tainted?" Sarah pressed. "By what?" "By the fact that it might have held a daughter. It was tainted by failure." He spat. 7 failures and a gasp went through the courtroom. He had said it. He had admitted it. He had called his own children failures in a court of law. His lawyers looked horrified. They tried to recover, but the damage was done. He had revealed the monster for all to see. NTHE judge's verdict was swift and brutal. She awarded me the largest child support settlement in the state's history, citing David's callous and morally reprehensible behavior. She ordered him to pay for my legal fees and to set up 7 individual trust funds for his daughters. But it was her final words that felt like true justice. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice like ice, "you speak of legacy. A legacy is not built with wood and nails. It is built with love and character. You destroyed your legacy when you threw it in a dumpster. Mrs. Sterling, on the other hand, has built a legacy that will endure. You are dismissed." As David stormed out of the courtroom, his face purple with rage, I felt a profound sense of peace. It wasn't about the money, it was about the truth. The verdict of the swallows had been delivered. Their broken wings were finally free to fly. And years later, our house is no longer a fortress built from scraps. It is a home built on hope. The chaos of 7 infants has transformed into the vibrant, beautiful chaos of 7 young women. Our small rental is filled with the sound of laughter, of violin practice, of arguments over who gets the last cookie, of life. It is noisy and messy and the most wonderful place on earth. And Hope is a budding scientist, her room a fascinating mess of beakers and rock collections. Faith is a writer, her journal always in hand. Grace is a dancer, moving through the house with an elegance that belies her strength. Mercy is the compassionate one, always looking out for her sisters and the stray animals she brings home. Joy lives up to her name, her infectious laughter the soundtrack of our lives. Patience is the artist, her canvases leaning against every wall. And Serenity, my quietest, is a gifted musician, her fingers flying over the piano keys, filling our home with beautiful melodies. The 7 oak frames I made from the broken cradle hang in a line in our living room. Each holds a school picture, a snapshot of a girl growing into her own person. The sculpture of the broken swallows hangs above them, a constant reminder that beautiful things can be born from the most painful breaks. My daughters know the story of the cradle. I told them when they were old enough to understand. It is not a story of bitterness, but a story of origin. It is the story of how they were loved fiercely from the moment they were born. David is a distant, irrelevant ghost. The child support payments arrive every month like clockwork, a cold, electronic transfer devoid of any emotion. He has never once asked to see his daughters. He has never sent a birthday card or a Christmas gift. He remarried, a woman who quickly gave him the son he so desperately craved. Sometimes, I see pictures of them in society magazines, a perfect, smiling family. It doesn't hurt anymore. I just feel a quiet pity for the woman who thinks she has the prize, and for the boy who will be raised to believe that love is conditional. And I went back to school, fulfilling my old dream. I am now the head curator at a local art museum. My specialty is found object art, celebrating artists who, like me, find beauty in the discarded. My daughters are my greatest masterpiece. One evening, I was sitting on the porch, watching the sun set. Grace, my dancer, came and sat beside me, leaning her head on my shoulder. She is 16 now, on the cusp of adulthood. "Mom," she said quietly, "do you ever wish things had been different? That Dad had been different?" And I thought for a moment, watching her sisters inside, their silhouettes moving behind the warm, glowing windows of our home. I thought of the splintered wood in the dumpster and the 7 tiny babies sleeping in laundry baskets. I thought of the cold, empty mansion and this loud, love-filled house. "No," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't." His rejection was the best thing that ever happened to us. He thought he was leaving me in ruins, but he was wrong. He wasn't the foundation of our house. He was just the demolition crew that cleared the way for us to build something real. NSHE smiled, understanding. "A house built on hope," she whispered, repeating the phrase I had used so many times. "Exactly," I said, pulling her close. He threw away a cradle, but he gave us a universe. And in the quiet of the evening, surrounded by the legacy he had tried to destroy, I knew with every fiber of my being that I was the richest woman in the world.